Welcome back to the Everton Byline. This is episode 25. I am Matt Jones and I am joined by Paddy Boylan to talk about an Everton win. Paddy, what a game at Goodison Park. Unnecessarily terrifying and tense towards the end, but a win nonetheless. But first of all, we should say happy birthday to you. It was your birthday yesterday. And what a way to spend it.
Yeah, I mean, best present I could have hoped for, really, an Everton win, and probably in my case an unexpected Everton win, given how Wednesday night had gone. At this point, I probably have to confess that I didn't cover the game on Sunday. I took the day off. I didn't attend the game, so maybe that's a message to me that I need to stay away from now on.
I mean, I won't go that far. Maybe a bit harsh on you, but if the trend continues, then we might have to come back to that. But no, like I said, hopefully you had an excellent day. But yeah, Ed, before we get started, as ever, a reminder we are sponsored by the Bridewell. I know a lot of our regulars on the Blue Room were in there on Saturday night with our good friend Rob Vera. I believe they drank into the small hours, and Rob was a little bit tender when I saw him on Sunday. So they had a great time was had by all there on a Saturday night. And if you're watching us on YouTube, do hit like, do hit subscribe. You'll get notified whenever we do a podcast. I'll put one of these up. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. And the same goes for if you're listening as well. Ratings and reviews are always helpful. And you can comment now as well on Spotify. So it'd be good to know what everybody thinks. I'm sure everyone will have loads to say after what was a great win for the Blues on Sunday. And let's get straight into it, Paddy, because I think I was feeling quite deflated. I'm not going to lie after the game on Wednesday night. I think it was one of those where, and I think we spoke about this on Friday actually when we did our pod in the Lakes, and it did feel like one of those where you had to squint really to see any real positive change or any major difference. But Sunday, both literally in terms of the team sheet and the way in which when that dropped a quarter to one, you could see the changes in personnel, and then pretty much straight away when we saw the way in which the team shaped up on the pitch and the things they were doing, it was noticeable very, very quickly that having had a few more days to work on the training ground and get his ideas together, that Moyes had time to put his own spin on things.
Yeah, I mean, I like you was quite low on Wednesday night and on Thursday, predominantly because I was expecting Moyes come in and galvanise, and I was expecting that kind of new manager bounce. And while it may have been a little bit better in places, and I think Everton did create some better chances against Villa, it wasn't quite what I was expecting or hoping for. So my concern was almost that we were just going to witness a bit more of a continuation of the season as a whole, even though there'd been a manager change. I mean, maybe that was an emotional response after an emotional couple of weeks. And I suppose with the benefit of hindsight, what the last week has allowed him to do finally post Villa is get some proper time with those players on the training ground and start drilling into what he really wants. And I mean, clearly, just from the team sheet alone, there were some notable changes here. I think, I don't mean this in a negative sense at all, but they're quite easy wins to put Jake O'Brien and Jesper Lindstrom in. I almost feel like you get fans on side more or less straight away just by being a bit proactive with selection. But what I really liked here was that I think very early days you're seeing a departure from the quite rigid, uncompromising Dyche setup. I mean, Moyes quite clearly prepared to take a few more risks. Everton are playing more with the ball, as we've discussed. They've been tasked with getting the ball down and playing. I mean, after the game, he mentioned that Jake O'Brien, one of the reasons Jake O'Brien had been included in that kind of hybrid third centre-back / right-back role was because he would help them build better from the back. I mean, he's 6'6", but good on the ball by all accounts, and that's one of his strengths. I mean, that's kind of anathema to Dyche, isn't it? He wants to go direct pretty much as quickly as he can into the main striker. But I mean, the other changes here, not just getting the ball down and playing, but I think quite clear to me how close Lindstrom and I were to Calvert-Lewin and how much more support he had. some really good football in there from Everton, particularly in the first half. But I mean, my favourite moment by far is just all of the Ndiaye goal, and I think it's really easy to focus on the final part of that move and how good it is, how explosive, and how he keeps. Even like Everton put a video out earlier today, like this is kind of in vogue thing where slow mo, everything's super slowed down, and you can see every kind of moment the gears kind of whirring. And even in that, like Dragusin tries to knock him off balance, destabilize him as he runs into the box and die. And he's lean, but he is really quite strong in his physique, and he's able to hold off defenders. I mean, all of that was excellent, but the bit I really loved, Matt, was the give and go deeper in midfield between Ndiaye, the interplay between Ndiaye and Idrissa Gueye to open up the space for Ndiaye to get into that position. And like, he is very capable in those positions, but we haven't seen him in them enough. I mean, may have been playing nominally as a left winger, but there he's right in the centre of the pitch, able to size up a defender and take them on 1-for-1. So, I mean, loads of positives in all of this, and probably later in the pod we might get onto some of the things that I didn't like so much, because I think we have to, after a game where Everton very nearly squandered this from a great position. The last few minutes were excruciating, and probably for me, pretty much from the point at which Kulusevski lobbed the ball over 3 or 4 Everton defenders to make it 3-1. It was pretty excruciating, and there were probably some lessons for everyone to learn there. But a great kind of unexpected win, even against a depleted Tottenham. And it's given everybody a massive kind of spring in the step. I mean, today's meant to be Blue Monday, isn't it? But I mean, I'm sure plenty of Everton fans are pretty happy today.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm honestly not walking around on air because I've had such a busy few days with going away and 2 matches, and Rob being over, obviously. And I think it's hitting me like a train today, and I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm not going to lie. But I think you're right. You know, from the second goal is I think is really interesting from a number of different ways, and I'm sure there'll be people who might look at this and think we're reading too much into it. But I think you're right about the build-up play on the halfway line. But I was watching the video that Everton put out today in regards to, you know, they do it after every good result.
Yeah.
They do the unseen Everton, I think it's called, or certainly behind the scenes. And it is loads of that, you know, like you mentioned there, like the real HD 4K, I think, you know, camera footage, which looks like it has a popping through your screen. And you're sort of watching the build up to that goal back. And I think that there are moments in the build up, even before the 1-2, where I think under the previous manager, be it Jake O'Brien, I think has the ball, he stops, checks, comes back to Tarkowski. Tarkowski, I think, actually is closed down by Son, isn't he? And he just takes a second and cuts back inside and then passes out to Branthwaite. And the tiny, tiny little things, but I think certainly when we weren't playing well, and certainly under Dyche, I imagine the first thought in their head there would have been get it forward into the channels, knock it down the line, try and hit Calvert-Lewin. And that's not to say that we didn't do that at all on Sunday, because there were direct bits of play in there. And I think certainly in those latter stages, as you mentioned, when the pressure came on us a little bit, we started to, some of those old habits started to creep back in. So I think that the fact that they were willing to do that, and certainly the fact that Idrissa Gueye and Ndiaye play a 1-2 on the halfway line with Spurs pressing them, obviously what Ndiaye went on to do with the run and the finish, I think all those little things show that they were maybe told to not be flashy and take loads of chances on the ball, but just to sort of trust their ability. And I felt like that was just evident throughout the game. It wasn't take, you know, massive chances and try and take on, you know, if you're a centre half, try and take on closing down attackers. It was just trust your ability a bit more, lads. You know, you're all quite good at this. You know, as much as we lament them sometimes, these are Premier League footballers playing at the very highest level. So take a second, trust your ability and find the pass. And I think the other thing as well, which is the build up to that goal sort of points to, is the way in which Moyes set the team up. And I think as much as O'Brien was the right side of the defence, at times it was a back three, wasn't it, with Lindstrom as a wing back and Mikolenko as a wing back on the other side. But I think having that extra player there building up, and it goes out to O'Brien and then back to Tarkowski and then back to Branthwaite, that's the advantage of that system, isn't it? You know, if you've got players who maybe aren't amazing on the ball, trying to play out a little bit more from the back. I think having a third centre back there just gives all of them that extra sort of safety blanket, because there is an easy pass on more often than not, and if you do lose it, then there is a bit more cover. So
yeah,
I think it's brilliant, and obviously the capping moment of it is Ndiaye himself and what he goes on to do. And I think just before that, Paddy, I don't know if you remember, but Son has a chance where he squares up Branthwaite and goes on his left foot and he shoots straight at Pickford. And I remember saying to my dad, like in the ground, because right in front of us, I remember saying to him, like, Son's so hard to defend in those situations because he can't go either way, can't he? You know, he's made a career in the Premier League out of doing that, where he gets it, goes up to the defender, and the defender doesn't know which side he's going to go on. And then Ndiaye goes and does exactly the same at the other end, but even better. And I think you're right. Like they're the things you want to see more from him, because listen, he's not Son or prime Son by any means, but he has got that ball carrying ability. He can cut inside and shoot with his right foot. He can go out on his outside and shoot with his left foot. I think he scored one against Doncaster in the cup, didn't he? Like that, where he sort of went round the outside of the defender and fired at him with his left. I'm pretty sure. I think he's saying. And listen, I think Moyes was really interested in the press conference afterwards, where he said there is more to come from this lad. You know, he wasn't just sitting there wallowing in how good he was and what a goal he scored. It felt like he was, again, you know, going back to last week and what he said in the press conference about putting pressure on the forwards to score. It was sort of like, right, yeah, you can do that, and I want to see it a lot more. And I think one of the hallmarks of the performance on Sunday was that Calvert-Lewin and Ndiaye linked up for me more than I've seen them in any game this season. And I've not got any stats or anything. I'd be interested to see what someone like Mick maybe could provide them, but it felt like there was just more interchanging between them than we'd seen at any point this season. So gone on for a little bit there, but it just felt like with the ball, certainly, I think two things stood out massively for me. One, there's more confidence, and it felt like they've been given more license to just show a bit more of the ability. And I think two as well, they just seem to have a bit more of a plan what to do when Calvert-Lewin and certainly our attacking players had the ball.
Well, I mean, going back to one of our previous podcasts and some of the criticism, both externally and internally, on Dyche, was that there was never much of an attacking plan. There was never much particular guidance beyond get the ball forward into Calvert-Lewin and try and support. I mean, one of the things we had seen was that Everton just kept on retreating. Particularly whenever they conceded goals, Everton would retreat and have him so isolated up top that, I mean, how many times this season have we said that playing up front for Everton is a thankless task, whoever it is. I mean, part of this is just, I think, Moyes' tweaks to get players closer to Calvert-Lewin. And what I really liked was that Lindstrom was given license and freedom to be really direct on the right wing, to push the ball past opposition men, get crosses into the box and be really aggressive, not just out of possession, which he was, but in possession too with his actions there. The funny thing, Matt, is that if you tell players that they can only play one way, and you always beat down on them and say, don't want you to do this, effectively you're not good enough to do it, then it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and players start to question their own ability and confidence wanes. There are a few players in this squad now who are kind of reclamation projects for Moyes. I think like Jack Harrison's very clearly one for me, who is quite considerably better than he has shown this season at times. Even at the start of last season, we saw that. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I would have said, was one. Jake O'Brien, just because of the lack of minutes. But it's funny what happens when you empower players and you give them a bit more trust and you say to them, we want you to play in the right areas, but play. And we saw some of that. I mean, Lindstrom's best performance of the season by a distance. Up there with with Calvert-Lewin and Ndiaye, and probably the unheralded one in all of this, Idrissa Gueye, who I thought was outstanding in central midfield, just about every way.
I don't think many people have mentioned him, have they? But he was outstanding at the weekend.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I mean, for me, it's quite remarkable that you've got a lad of that age who's 35 years of age now, running around midfield, putting out fires everywhere, but then also showing real moments of quality in possession as well. I think we underestimate how important he is still to this team. He's one of the few that you really wouldn't want to get injured. I mean, you don't want any player to get injured, but he's one of the few you really wouldn't want to miss for any length of time. I mean, so there's some really good performances now, and I think that goes down to giving players more confidence, trusting them a bit more, giving the attacking players a bit more freedom in the final third. And I think you have to give credit to the players, but I think you have to give credit to Moyes, because I thought this was really quite good from him in a whole load of ways. And maybe the only blot on the copybook was how the game was managed 75 on, which did seem quite familiar again, unfortunately, from past Everton games. But I mean, all in all, 3-2 massively flattered Spurs. I mean, that to me, if they come away with a 4-5-1 defeat, I don't think they could have had any complaints at all.
Oh no! And like I've been watching the highlights today, and I actually forget like how many chances Everton had in that first half. Mangala hits the post. Calvert-Lewin has a couple more one-on-ones, which he doesn't quite get the hold of. Tarkowski has a header. I think Tarkowski should have a penalty as well.
Should have a penalty.
Like I mean, that I don't want to go too much into it because there's loads of good stuff to talk about. But that is astonishing that that's not been given on review, because he is effectively dragged down.
Did you see Matt McCallagher on Ref Watch?
It wasn't a penalty. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, his explanation for that, believe it or not, and to me, this is the biggest load of nonsense I've heard in a long time. But he said something along the lines of, because both of them were together initially and kind of grappling and holding, but that negated the pull afterwards. It's almost like, well, if they're holding initially, then you can do whatever the hell you want after that, and it's not a penalty. I mean, quite clearly wrong. Quite clearly, just it didn't make sense. I mean, Spurs have a penalty shout of their own. I think the Everton one is a stronger shout in a whole load of ways. I think Tarkowski should also score his header, by the way. But even in the second half, I mean, Calvert-Lewin's played in by Lindstrom, and maybe it's a little bit behind, but he swivels and shoots just wide. I didn't really see the Spurs fight back coming. If anything, I thought Everton would push on and get more goals. And maybe this matters where we maybe look a little bit at what needs to get better, particularly in defence. I mean, one of the things I was moaning about on Twitter during the game was, for the goal at 3-0, I thought, again, Jared Branthwaite was far too high and far too aggressive in trying to win the ball, and that created problems for Everton basically from there. He comes for the ball, is in midfield, and if he's going to go into those areas, he needs to win it. And if not, Everton are outnumbered, and we saw the goal. I think after that, everybody is kind of scrambling to make amends and retrieve the situation. I don't think Pickford covers himself in loads of glory for either goal. Obviously, Michael Keane comes on in very famous David Moyes fashion, almost like as a Shane Duffy against Oldham to ward against crosses.
The new weird sub, isn't it?
Defend crosses, but there's nowhere for that. But I think Pickford should probably also come for Richarlison's goal. And if I had one complaint, and maybe this is about squad depth as well as much as anything, but if I had one complaint, it was that Everton invited a bit too much pressure on. They allowed Spurs to get the goal that then made it a bit nervier than it obviously needed to be. And to be honest, Matt, I think it was crying out for something different up front as well. Not just with Dom, but I thought like the Decore was quite clearly out on his feet about 60, 65 minutes in and giving the ball away left, right and centre in that spell after a better first half. And that's where I think if James Garner, for example, had been on the bench or somebody like him, then even Timmy Rabuna, maybe we would have seen them come on to try and shore up the midfield, as it were. He's spoken very positively, Moyes, about Harrison Armstrong so far, both as a player and a kind of personality. But it just felt like maybe he didn't trust Armstrong to do that role at that moment in time on Sunday just yet. So, I mean, that's kind of game management stuff for me, and obviously it very nearly went awry. But there's loads of good. I mean, there's probably 75 minutes of good here. And I think that 75 minutes of good, there's a lot of praise for David Moyes in there for just how well it went.
Yeah, just very quickly on the Branthwaite thing, like I've got like a little theory about what happened on Sunday. Like again, like in the ground, I thought it was really noticeable early on that, again, I think this is part of playing a back five, that whenever Kulusevski got the ball in that kind of right pocket for Spurs, like he was like aggressive and like really got out to him quickly. Like I think if it could happen in like the first 5 minutes, and I think again, I suppose one of the advantages of playing in a back five, which is what we were at times, is that when that one centre back goes on the left, which Brantford did a lot, your left back and tuck in. So your left wing back and tuck in, your right wing back and tuck in, and you become a four then. And I think initially it worked quite well, but I think as we made loads of changes to our team and our back four, and Spurs, I think they dropped Kulusevski back a bit deeper, didn't they, into midfield. You know, the more those changes happened and the more both teams sort of moved away from that original plan, it felt like Brantford kind of didn't know whether to push out and jump into midfield when Kulusevski got the ball, or to stay where he was. And ultimately, he just got a bit caught in between. But again, we'd have to look at it in a bit more detail at that at different moments. But
it's also the other thing with that matters. Well, two things. The first is, do you need to do that at 3-0? Do you need to give the opposition a sniff in that moment? I mean, I'm not suggesting batten down the hatches, but do you need one of your centre-backs on the halfway line trying to win the ball? The second is that what Spurs did, as you point out in the second half, is that Richarlison came on as more of a focal point and Kulusevski dropped deeper. So actually, Brantford was tracking Richarlison, who won the header for the first goal. And that's a different threat entirely. And it's just about, I mean, I can see why you'd maybe go really strong and look to push Kulusevski as far from goal as possible, because he is very dangerous when he turns. But I wouldn't particularly have a problem with Richarlison taking an aerial ball on the halfway line, to be honest. And I think that's game management, and maybe not just on Moyes, by the way. Maybe that's players making wrong decisions. But I think Brantwaite's been caught twice now, stepping into midfield this week, and thankfully it didn't cost Everton here, but it did actually on Wednesday night. That was really quite a poor goal. I wonder if O'Brien coming in is a kind of response to that, because I think we discussed a little bit how as soon as that ball broke down against Villa, it was basically Watkins v Tarkowski, and you can't have that scenario. So this can still get better, Matt. But I mean, isn't it nice that we're talking about a game in which Everton scored 3 goals in the first half, beaten Tottenham?
Yeah,
and there's still there are loads of positives, but there's some of the things that you can focus on and say, well, they could still improve it.
Yeah. Well, let's dig down a bit more into one, or maybe a couple of the main positives from the weekend. And you described some of the players there as a kind of rescue job for David Moyes, and I think 2 in particular, maybe 1 in particular, I wanted to focus on. That's O'Brien. You know, we've seen a bit more Lynch from having in his Everton career. We know a bit more what he's about, and I think, like you said, it was clear that was his best game for Everton, you know, since he moved to the club on loan in the summer. But the O'Brien one, I think, was a bigger shock to me, and I think to come in and sort of play him at right back or right centre back, you know, again, when I saw that, I thought Son and Maddison are going to be over to that side, and it could be quite tricky for him with someone like Spence overlapping as well. But he seems to handle it all really well. Seems to take it all in his stride, and I think that game, obviously, Paddy will do him the world of good. But I was also thinking as well, just before the match, I thought it was really interesting that he got to put up for media duties this week, having felt so obscure and so out of the loop under Dyche. I mean, I think we did a podcast a couple of months ago where you did a piece sort of talking about his future, and like I genuinely had forgotten he was an option for us, and that he existed. And it felt like, well, he's obviously going to leave on loan if this manager stays here, because there's nothing down for him. So I think that was a really smart move, just to get him in front of journalists, get him talking, you know, at the start of this new chapter. And I think the other thing as well, just to kind of bookend his week nicely, was that when he does go off, he goes off around the side and gets the big clap from the park end, you know, and he gets the walk around the pitch, and that must have felt so good for somebody who has been completely marginalised really since coming in, hadn't started the game, you know. Well, it was our biggest signing, wasn't he, this summer in terms of funds spent, you know, along with NDI. So I think it was really smart, I think, from Moyes, just to get him involved in all of it, be it the media side of it, be it in the team, and then obviously the fans do their part when he comes off and give him that great reception at the weekend, because it must not have been easy for him having left Lyon, having become a regular there, to come to Everton, see the team struggling, and to not get a sniff. So really, really pleased for him. And he showed, didn't he, I think, a little bit of what he's all about too.
Yeah, I mean, I think early doors, we're all looking for signs now as to A, what this is going to look like under David Moyes moving forward, but B, how it's going to work between Moyes and current personnel at the club, Kevin Thelwell, the recruitment department. And I mean, one of the things that's kind of been in my reporting, and we've spoken about on this podcast before, is that disconnect that seemed to grow since the summer over how you use Ilman and Dye, who's bought as a kind of number 10 option, but ends up playing on the left under Dyche, and Jake O'Brien brought in as a third centre-back option, somebody who's going to get minutes, but is then frustrated not to be playing at all and is fourth in the pecking order. I mean, we've spoken before about how in Everton's situation, they couldn't really afford to waste in quotation marks, 17 million right now on a fourth, certainly a fourth choice centre-back, given the other pressing areas of need. And I think it has been tough. I mean, frustration for Jake O'Brien not to start games. He said that himself over the last week, and I think that shone through in the reporting even before now. But we saw some of the very early days, but we saw some of the stuff that I think marked him out to recruitment. I mean, for a guy who's 6'6", I think he, as Moyes alluded to, he's pretty good on the ball. That's one of his strengths. I liked how he took to this sort of hybrid role, third centre back slash right back, and didn't seem phased by it. And I mean, it's funny, isn't it, Matt? We see lots of parallels even now. I mean, talk about Shane Duffy and David Weir sub, but this Jake O'Brien as a young centre back, kind of cutting his teeth in the Premier League, that seems very Joleon Lescott under Moyes, playing on the other side at left back before working his way in field. Moyes does like to do this, where he gives kind of newbies, rookies, for want of a better phrase, a bit of time in a slightly different position, only to then gradually integrate them into their preferred position. I mean, Jake O'Brien's had loads of interest in this window, and I've reported that, and now others have as well off the back of that. And interest from kind of across the continent, so not just the Premier League, but other major European leagues, and in some cases other major European clubs. And everybody sees that talent in him, even if he is a bit raw. I mean, it's unusual to have a 6'6" centre back who's so dominant, but can play and has a turn of pace. And I mean, I remember researching a piece on him shortly after he signed, and I mean, some of the data we got from Skill Corner, who are a stats provider, is that he was, I think, one of the quickest French centre backs in the French league last season, and one of the very quickest players in the Lyon side in terms of top speed. And we're all talking about Nuama and players like that, but I mean, when he gets going, Jake O'Brien can motor. So I thought that was a really positive sign. If we're looking for clues in terms of how Moyes is going to work with Thelwell and recruitment, again, early days, but he's brought O'Brien in, he's played Lindstrom, he's getting Ndai into more central areas. I mean, this is much more how it was all envisaged when it happened in the summer, and I mean, we need people to be on the same page. So I'd say that's kind of good early success there.
Yeah, and just on the stuff about him speaking to the media in the week, and I don't know if you know the answer to this question or not, but like I said, I thought it was quite interesting that they got put up, and I used that phrase "put up" to do that. Yeah. Would that be something that the manager decides, or is it something that other staff at the club decide, or will the players themselves have a say in who does the? Because when the team play on a Sunday, they have the Sundays, don't they? You know, I think is how
Sunday newspaper.
People who work in the industry will call it, which is a bit different to the usual sort of press conference embargo sort of routine you'd get for the Saturday game. But is that something that David Moyes would have had any impact on, getting O'Brien, speaking to reporters and getting involved in that sense, or is that something that perhaps I'm reading a bit too much into?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. Full transparency, I don't know the circumstances for this particular case with O'Brien. It would be fairly usual for it'd be fairly normal for a manager at Everton to have some kind of input. But what I would suggest normally tends to happen is that the media are effectively owed, in quotation marks, particularly the Sunday press, are owed interviews every now and then. And Everton, off the back of the noises they will have heard during the week on O'Brien, will have suggested him as a potential. And then Moyes will get a say. I mean, if they go to him and say, normally we're thinking of putting Jake O'Brien up, what do you think? He's got the power. He's well within his right to turn around and say, no, I think it's too soon. I don't want this lad having this much focus on him. But clearly everybody at Everton's been on the same page with this and thought it was a good opportunity to get him in front of fans, if you will. Those things normally help. I thought the quotes were good on the whole and reflected well on him. And yeah, he spoke about his frustration, but he also spoke about having a point to prove. And just to go back to this idea of reclamation projects or polishing players who are new into the club, I mean, that was kind of David Moyes' modus operandi. I mean, you could give, we mentioned one there, Lescott, but even players like Pienaar and Arteta who'd maybe fallen on hard times, and he kind of polished them up and turned them into proper, really good Premier League players. So I think these are positive early steps for Moyes and Jake O'Brien. And to me now, I don't see any reason for that to change unless there's a big tactical change. Something needs to move around. I don't see any reason why Jake O'Brien shouldn't be starting for Everton now moving forward in a similar role if they're going to play the same system.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, he's got to keep his place, hasn't he, in the team? And listen, I think it'll be tough if he's playing in that same position against Brighton at the weekend. You know, plays like Matoma and stuff on there. That's a different challenge altogether. But listen, really good first impression in that position, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. Last point, Paddy, just move on to something a little bit different, is from a transfer perspective. I think it's been really interesting how sort of candid and upfront Moyes has been about needing players to come in. He was obviously very vocal about it after the Aston Villa game, which would suggest there's positive developments and he's had positive sort of updates on that front in regards to new players coming through. But just sort of wanted to, not necessarily a state of play, but look at a couple of things in particular. In regards to outgoings, and I use this in inverted commas because the player we're going to talk about is Brozier. What do you think the situation is there? Because there's been a few different reports about him potentially going back to Chelsea, and then potentially Chelsea wanting Everton to pay up his loan in full if they do send him back. I feel a bit sorry for him, really, if that is the case, where it's like, no, we don't want him, no, we don't want him. But it is a bit of ruthless business, isn't it? But I think it'd probably be fair to say if Everton could potentially cancel that and bring in someone else in on loan, it would massively be to their benefit at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I like Brozier as a player, and I was excited to see him at Goodison, as I've said many times before. Impressed with some of his early cameos, even away at places like Manchester City, just in the way he moved at pace with the ball and could stretch defences and had, I mean, for his size, good footwork and everything else. The problem has been that he's been very unlucky with injuries, not only at Everton, but in his time at Chelsea too. I mean, I can kind of understand both clubs' negotiation stance here. I mean, Everton, it makes no sense if he's out for the 10 to 12 week time frame that Moyes initially put on this. It makes no sense for Everton to waste a domestic loan space, their final domestic loan space, on a crocked player, particularly while having to pay his wages. At the same time, Everton entered into a deal with Chelsea, whereby they wouldn't pay for Brozier during his initial rehabilitation phase, but from the point at which he played a game, they were liable for his wages through to the end of the season. So if you're Chelsea, you're saying, why should we take this player back and pay those wages when he's not doing anything for us? So I understand both of those positions. I mean, my take on this, and that this is a guess, but to me, Everton should cancel this loan, in my opinion, if they can. And those conversations have taken place, and I don't think we're yet in a position where we have an outcome. I think we've seen some posturing from Chelsea in the media, kind of through off the record soundings about how they currently envisage him staying at Everton, and so on and so forth. But it's telling that Moyes spoke about it. It's telling that Everton have spoken to Chelsea about this. And if I could propose a solution to this, I mean, Everton are currently liable to pay 100% of his wages through to the end of the season. Probably there is a negotiation to be had where they say, let's cancel that loan. We'll still pay you some of the money because we have to, but let's compromise on that. And then it becomes, can we pay X amount, X percentage of that 100% of his wages, or can we take somebody else to mitigate that? And then it becomes that kind of scenario. So there is probably a negotiation to be had here, and I hope there is a negotiation. There is a deal to be done, because in all of this, whether you're on the Everton side of the fence or the Chelsea side, there's a young player here, still a young player, who's had drastically bad luck and just needs a chance and needs an arm around the shoulder and everything else, and that needs to be remembered. So let's see how it goes. But as I understand it, I've not seen anything as of Monday, 6 p.m, whenever we're recording tonight. I don't think it's moved substantially yet beyond the conversations.
Yeah, I suppose the other side to this is incomings as well. And obviously there's been loads of names mentioned, but just in terms of obviously the news we had this week about the PSR charge as well, and that outstanding issue, which had kind of just been forgotten about in the Premier League, kind of felt like they were just ignoring it and hoping it went away. And obviously able to confirm this week that it has gone away now, and that decision's been made, and that's a bit of a relief. But do you think that impacts incomings in any way at all now that's kind of been sorted, and they can potentially have a bit more freedom in the market? Because it does seem like there's been quite a lot of names mentioned for a club like us who are short of finance, or believed to be short of finances.
Yeah, I mean, I think Everton have expected it to go this way for quite some time, and I think the radio silence from the Premier League end was pretty telling anyway. So Everton will have expected this outcome. And while you can never guarantee anything, particularly not with the Premier League, based on previous interactions, what you can do is you can now discount the possibility of them having to very urgently find some cash to come up with a shortfall on PSR. I mean, if that verdict had gone against Everton, then it would have thrown the calculations out for not only the last set of accounts, but all the ones to come. So I don't think it massively moves the dial in terms of what they can do for this month. It just means that they don't have that unnecessary extra headache where they might have to sell a player they weren't expecting to, for example, to stay on the right side of the line. I do think PSR is still a consideration for this month. And still, I mean, for the first time in a long time, we're talking about Everton having money under new ownership, but not fully being able to make use of it. I mean, the smart money, all of my money basically would go on there being some form of incomings this month, but the vast majority of the rebuild in terms of the squad happening over the summer. I just think that's logical on so many different levels.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's as much as we all want new faces coming in, like Everton going out and spending loads of money on potential short-term fixes, like that's kind of how we've got into this position in the first place, isn't it? I think
it's very Allardyce. It's very Allardyce. Winter of 2017.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, I go back to the Walcott Tosin, January, and what was it, 50 million we spent on those two cumulatively? Yeah.
Without the wages, by the way, Matt, and Walcott and Tosin were on big wages. So, I mean, that contributed a lot to the PSR issues that followed.
And that's not to say like we don't need new players, because we obviously do. Yeah, but like you said, I think that's why that loan place is so valuable, isn't it? If you can get someone on loan and just get through to the end of the season that way, with the help of a loan player and reassess, then that is crucial. But yeah, it does feel like we've got 10 days left, or 11 days left of the window. We will see where that goes. But it does feel like there's going to be movement there. Just to finish off, Paddy, we've brought up our quarter century today. And that means we're going to look back at number 25. I think this is the most diverse number in terms of players who were absolutely dreadful for us and players who were really good. I think the gap between the best player who wore number 25 for us in the Premier League era and the worst is bigger than any other number. Is that
go on then.
Is that a fair theory, do you think?
Best player to where the 25, in your opinion, was?
Oh, I think it's tough. I'd probably just go Fellaini
Yeah.
over Nigel Martin, who I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
So I think Marawan just gets it because I think Fellaini probably gets into a Everton Premier League 11, whereas Pickford, as we've discussed recently, has probably edged Martin out now. So I'd just put Fellaini ahead. But I love Nigel Martin. He was a brilliant goalie.
Well, he was an exceptional goalkeeper for Everton, and obviously could have joined the club much earlier in his career. I think it was when he left Crystal Palace. And I don't really understand some of the stuff I see from other fans about Marouane Fellaini now. It's almost like the stint at Man United tarnished his reputation. But I mean, actually, he did pretty well at Man United, all things considered. He was a very, very effective Premier League player, a regular in an excellent Belgian cohort, if not necessarily a team, but a superstar Belgium generation, and could kind of do a bit of everything. I mean, we saw him play deep really effectively for Everton, but he played as a box-to-box midfielder. He played as an auxiliary striker. I mean, I think we've spoken before countless times about the night he bullied Michael Carrick and Man United at Goodison. And honestly, what's one of my favourite games as a supporter at Goodison. I think there's a lot of slander there about Marouane. I think it's pretty laughable, really, given how good of a player he was. So, like you, just on longevity, I think he is the best player to wear the 25 for Everton in the Premier League era. Who's the worst? Are you going Gbamin?
Well, yeah, that is. It's harsh, isn't it? Because it's not really his fault. But when you think how much did we spend on 25 million-ish, was it? Or 20 million?
Yeah.
And you think like he was brought in to replace Idrissa Gueye. And do you know what? I remember like the first start he had was against Watford, I think, when we won 1-0. And Bernard scored. It was him and Gomez in midfield, and it looked like the balance was really good between them. And I think he played again that season after that game, am I right in saying?
Mm.
But I also remember being at Palace away when he came off for his debut and he looked horrendous, which was probably understandable because he brought up the bench in difficult circumstances. But
yeah,
I mean, in terms of rotten luck with injuries, he was absolutely right up there, wasn't he? And I actually remember as well when I think Benitez started him at Wolves away, and I think it was his first game back for a long time, and it was quite sad actually watching him that he was just so off the pace and clearly had lost any ability that he kind of had in terms of fitness. And I think he was dragged off at half time. So
yeah,
he was a really quite sad story for us.
Yeah, and I think there was quite a lot of potential and ability there. I mean, he had the physicality, but he was also kind of good bringing the ball out, and he was capable of playing in a couple of different positions and struck the ball pretty well, was able to pass the ball. So I think the actual identification of the player was probably pretty good in terms of like what you want in a Premier League midfielder. I mean, the pretty unenviable task of replacing Idrissa Gueye, even with Fabian Delph there as well as the other signing, which is another bad signing on face value. But then too, just the luck he had with injuries. And I think going back over his injury record, there had been stuff that was problematic in his time just before Everton that maybe wasn't fully analysed or picked up on. Obviously, thrust into things quite. I think he was away with Ivory Coast at the Cup of Nations over that summer when he signed, and then came in more or less with no pre-season, and then was playing straight away. And
didn't he get injured in like a bizarre? Was it like foot tennis or something?
Yeah. I mean, that was during his rehabilitation phase. So I think initially what happened was he had his first injury, and the club, from what I remember at the time, he didn't have surgery. They decided not to have surgery, but then later they decided to row back on that, and he did have surgery, which obviously extended the time he was out. Then he comes back and he's doing foot tennis at the training ground at Finch Farm, and he gets injured in a freak accident there, and then it was just setback after setback, really. So I mean, we'll never know how good he could have been for Everton, but I believe he's rebuilding his career very slowly in France. He was at Dunkirk for a while. He's now at Nantes. And hopefully he forges a career. But yeah, absolutely disastrous signing for all those reasons outlined.
Yeah, and some other good ones as well. Funes Mori, interesting player, I'll say. Not necessarily a good player. Great knee slides and barbecues. I imagine that's what his book will be called. If he ever does bring
Knee
one out.
slides and great knee slides and barbecues. I mean,
Yeah,
there's that photo of him, famous photo of him where he's outside in what looks like the cold and the winter in his flip flops with a barbecue, and just thinking this guy's an absolute mentalist, and he was really. When you even think back to him injuring, was it Divock Origi at Anfield, and then
it was awful.
Being sent off, and then kind of giving it the big one as he's going off, and he's been sent off. He's going to get absolutely whacked as a result of this. So
he missed the semi-final against United, which meant Jack Gallagher had to basically play on one leg, and he had to play Besic at right back because of all the reshuffling to the team.
Yeah, I mean,
that was mad. But he did score some really important goals for us, didn't he? I think, but yeah, he was not the best defender. Aaron Lennon in his first loan spell, I think he was good.
Yeah,
good player for Everton. Certainly came in and did a really good job. Others, 2 goalies, Esper infamous Esper and Andrew Pettinger, who I've never heard of, Paddy. So if anyone wants to tell us anything about him, please let us know. And the same goes for Peter Dane and Danny Williamson as well, who've got not, I wouldn't say vivid memories of, but certainly know bits about them. But one other good player we should mention who wore it as well, Michael Ball.
Yeah, I love Michael Ball.
Yeah, brilliant player.
I love Michael Ball when I was a kid and he was in the side. He that thing like a local lad, come good, playing at left back, had a great left foot and could cross a ball, could strike a ball, took penalties, took free kicks. But he also had that kind of typically Scouse thing of like being able to stick his foot in and everything else, and played centre back, played left back, obviously capped by England at Villa Park, I think it was, against Spain. Another one who obviously left at the time for Rangers, but beset by injuries. And maybe that's the theme of this number 25 in the main map, because I think the only thing I remember about Danny Williamson really is that effectively he was the budget at the time Gbamin, in that he came and he was just always injury on the injury table. He was very injury prone. So yeah, number 25 not great, but I mean worth it really just for a chat about Marouane Fellaini, I think.
Yeah, I think when we're getting into that territory now where it's going to be some hits and lots of misses in terms of the numbers, and I've just had a little sneak peek at next week's. Next week's is great, yeah. So we'll leave that cliffhanger there anyway. But cheers to Paddy. That has been Byline 25. Great to talk about a win and some wonderful goals. If you've not listened to post-match yet, by the way, do go and check it out. Lots of great lines from Rob Vera and a very emotional send-off for what was his last game at Goodison Park. That's well worth checking out. Blue Monday was out yesterday too. So that was with Dave and Roger. And we'll have the weekly, we'll have subs, we'll have weekend preview, and all usual stuff coming up later in the week. Just a reminder, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. There in Liverpool City Centre. Do get yourself down there if you can. Always a great place to stop in for a drink. And a reminder to hit like, hit subscribe, and comment if you watch us on YouTube, which more and more people have been doing. So thank you for getting involved. To those of you who like to watch us and those of you who like to listen to us as well, do leave us a rating, do leave us a review. All these things help. But yeah, we'll be back again next week to reflect on what could be a big week in the transfer market and what is certainly a big game at the Amex on Saturday as well. Up the top, We'll speak to you soon.